studies like this or techniques like this would open up a lot of opportunities where the relief could be sent to the right place at the right time, beforehand, instead of just spreading it too far, too thin.
Andy says down the road, we could see storm warning systems improve in different parts of the world. I'm Elizabeth Troval for Marketplace.
And in New York, I'm Sabri Benishore with the Marketplace Morning Report. From APM, American Public Media.
Many local races will be decided in the August 20th primaries. Before you vote, compare the candidates at jaxtoday.org/vote. That's voter guides you can trust at jaxtoday.org/vote.
It's storm season, and JEA is prepared with more than 2,000 employees ready to respond should extreme weather hit our area. And they'll work 24/7 to get our area restored. More info at jea.com/storm. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjax.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Ahead in the next 5 minutes, live local news for the First Coast from the WJCT News team.
Good morning, I'm Dan Scanlon in for Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, while Florida remains a crucial state for the November 2024 presidential race, several local races will be decided in the primary election tonight. Political expert John Daigle joins us to discuss the key races to watch, potential shakeups, and what to expect in November. Then two theatrical behemoths bring award-winning actress Linda Purl to the Jacksonville stage as the flamboyant and eccentric Mame, and the story of an ambitious mother who will stop at nothing to transform her daughter into stars. Join the conversation. Give us a call at 904-549-2937 or email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. You can also tag us on Facebook, Instagram, or X. It's all ahead this hour after the day's news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. President Biden handed over the political reins to Vice President Harris last night in his keynote speech at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. NPR's Ben Giles reports.
The night was a celebration for Democrats who've been buoyed by a surge of optimism and a boost in the polls since Harris quickly gathered support for the party's nomination after Biden withdrew from the race last month. New York Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was one of several speakers to greet the raucous crowd with gratitude for the past and hope for the future.
Thank you, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, for your vision. And thank you, Joe Biden, for your leadership.
The night served as somewhat of a curtain call for Biden's decades-long political career. Multiple speakers praised his decision to bow out of the presidential race as a final act of service to the nation. Ben Giles, NPR News, Chicago.
Tonight's speakers include former President Barack Obama and Harris's husband, second gentleman Doug Emhoff. 3 states are holding primary elections today: Alaska, Florida, and Wyoming. Alaska is using ranked choice voting. This allows voters to choose candidates by preference so they can select their first choice candidate and also their second and more, if needed. If a candidate gets a majority of first preference votes, that candidate wins. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Egypt pushing for a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Blinken says Israel has agreed to the latest ceasefire proposal and that it is up to Hamas to agree. NPR's Daniel Estrin has more from Tel Aviv.
Blinken announced Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is backing the latest U.S. ceasefire proposal, but it's unclear what elements he's backing. The details of the proposal have not been published. Hamas says the latest proposal favors Israel. Hamas official Osama Hamdan says the gaps have not been bridged.
NPR's Daniel Estrin reporting. Firefighters in Northern California are gaining ground on the 4th largest wildfire in the state's history. NPR's Nathan Rott says the wildfire is now more than 50% contained.
The park fire burning north of Chico, California, is the largest in the country this year, burning nearly 700 square miles of land and hundreds of structures. But But it's only one of the scores of large fires that are currently burning across the western U.S., following one of the hottest starts to summer on record. More than 22,000 firefighters and support personnel are working to contain those fires, according to the National Interagency Fire Center. That includes fire managers from Australia and New Zealand and a contingent of U.S. soldiers. Above average fire potential is forecast for much of California, the Great Basin, and the Pacific Northwest through September. Nathan Rott, NPR News.
You're listening to NPR News from Washington.
And this is WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Good morning. I'm Stephen Ponson. Heads up, a crash right now on I-10 westbound at McDuff Avenue has two right lanes blocked there for an overturned semi-truck. Your best alternate around the slowdowns will be to take US 90. If you're looking for a job, it's possible you can find one at a Job News USA job fair next week in Jacksonville. Some 24 companies will be accepting applications and resumes and interviewing job seekers between 10 and 2 on Tuesday, August 27th at the Doubletree Riverfront Hotel on the South Bank. Parking is free and early registration is encouraged. You can find more information at jobnewsusa.com. Challengers seeking to throw Robert F. Kennedy Jr. off Georgia's presidential ballot say he must be disqualified because the New York address he used on Georgia ballot access petitions is a sham. They made the arguments Monday in a hearing before an administrative judge. It shows how a New York court decision finding Kennedy doesn't live there is being used to attack Kennedy's ballot access in other states. A lawyer for Kennedy says Georgia is improperly trying to impose additional qualifications on a presidential candidate beyond those in the U.S. Constitution. This afternoon in Jacksonville, we're going to have highs in the mid-90s with a slight chance of rain later on in the afternoon. Mostly clear overnight with lows in the mid-70s. Wednesday, we'll have highs in the lower 90s under mostly sunny skies.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Charles Schwab, offering investors choices like full-service wealth management, advice, investing, and trading on Thinkorswim. Learn more at schwab.com. And the listeners who support this NPR station.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health.
And good morning. I'm Dan Scanlon in for Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Well, today, voting in Florida's primary is well underway. Polls opened at 7 and will remain open till 7 tonight. So we delve into some of the key races. Later in the program, the Florida Theatre and Theatre Jacksonville unite to present a special in-concert production detailing the adventures of a Depression-era eccentric. But first, I haven't voted yet. Neither has our next guest, but we're going to do it within the next hour or so. Although Florida is pivotal in the upcoming presidential race, the state's primary today is anticipated to be relatively low-key. Joining me to discuss the important local and state races that will be decided with some possible surprises and what to expect in November is political expert and former coworker of mine, John Daigle. Good morning, sir.
Hey, good morning, Dan. It's a big day.
It is a big day, and there's a lot of races. I've been looking at the ballot. It is very partisan in many cases, but there's some nonpartisan races here in St. Johns County, in Duval County, and then St. Johns County is a hotbed in some places.
It is.
So let's talk about the only statewide race on the ballot. That's the U.S. Senate seat, and that's held right now by Rick Scott, former governor, and he faces two Republican challengers, Keith Gross and John Columbus. Admittedly, as the sit-at-home TV viewer that I am, I've only seen an occasional Rick Scott ad. So let's take that into a snapshot.
Yeah, that actually, the race for the U.S. Senate on both the Republican and Democratic side are not going to be that exciting. I think both everybody knows kind of where that race is going in terms of it probably will be more exciting in November. But for the August primary, we kind of know Scott's going to emerge, and we kind of know who his opponent's going to be in November.
Well, who is Scott for those who don't know, and why is he so strong against the other two?
Well, of course, Rick Scott, former governor of Florida, he's been a leader in the U.S. Senate for a while. the interesting thing about Scott is the race. He's won several races in Florida, but a lot of his races that he's won have been extremely close. And Scott's never really won in a blowout, whereas there's not much expectation that the primary today will be a challenge for him. November could be a different story. His races, as opposed to like a DeSantis who's been winning races decisively, Scott's never won in a blowout. So I think with what's happening in Florida, with the amendments that are on the ballot, with momentum shifting a little bit towards the Democrats, with now Harris on the ticket, I think the November race, Scott could have a race on his hands in November.
And that November race is going to be against U.S. Rep. Debbie McCarcel-Powell, elected to Congress in 2018 as the first Ecuadorian American and first South American-born woman to be elected to Congress, losing her seat after one term. But she's back in the running against, again, admittedly, an extremely well-known name. So let's look ahead to November in that race and who the presumed victor today is going to go against.
And that's true. And McCarcel-Powell does have a race. She, like you said, she is presumed that she and Rick Scott will emerge today fairly easily for a pretty dynamic race in November. Normally, the safe money would be on Rick Scott in Florida, a traditionally, at least the last 10, 12 years, a reliably red state. However, like I said, McCarcel-Powell might not be the strongest candidate against Rick Scott, but with the other dynamics that are happening in November, with a lot of young voters and female voters coming out because of Harris, because of the abortion amendment, because of the recreational marijuana amendment, that could give a lot of wind at McCarcel-Powell's back. And those voters who are coming out for other reasons could be huge help for her against Rick Scott, who, like I said, has not ever been winning races by overwhelming margins. Most of his races have been won by 1% or less. He won by 10,000 votes against Nelson in the last race. So I think that could be an exciting race to watch in November.
And, of course, McCarcel-Powell does have some competition herself. She has Rod Joseph and Brian Rush, and Rush is a former four-term state representative. Any competition, any concerns there, any numbers that might cause a runoff?
No, I mean, we don't hear much about that race because most of the attention has been focused south of the I-4 corridor. But if you look at the money and you look at the things that usually predict a victory, all signs point to the fact that McCarcel-Powell will emerge today pretty easily.
Okay, if you are just joining us, we're talking to political expert John Daigle about key races to look for tonight, because today is Florida's primary day. As those election results filter in, you can join the conversation live on air by calling 904-549-2937. You can email First Coast Connect at WJCT.org or reach out on social media. If you're still up in the air about who to vote for, be sure to check out our nonpartisan voter guides at jaxtoday.org. We've also interviewed many of the candidates on this program, and those segments can be found on YouTube. Just search WJCT or First Coast Connect on the YouTube landing page. Well, yesterday, our guest speaker was the guy in charge of Duval County's elections, supervisor, and Jerry talked about the turnout. What do you think the turnout is today, and who's going to jump? Which party is going to jump out there?
Yeah, I heard your interview with Jerry Holland. I'm a big Jerry Holland fan. I think he's done a fantastic job over there. And Jerry did talk about the fact that right now we're looking at what would be a traditionally fairly low turnout, a little bit over 11% for the early and absentee voters. If you look at the numbers, our vote by mail numbers are significantly down from what they have been over the last 2 or 3 cycles. A lot of that has to do with the fact that the Republican Party has at times in recent years discouraged or disparaged vote by mail. And the question is whether those Republicans who used to vote by mail, whether they'll show up today and make up for, what appears to be a lackluster turnout. Right now, traditionally about half the voters will vote either by mail or early voting. And then the other half usually turn up on election day. If that model holds true, then we're looking at about a 23-22% turnout, which would be pretty low for an August primary. If the Republicans who used to vote by mail show up on election day, then we could be looking at 25-26% turnout, which would be about average.
Yeah, Jerry Holland had indicated he thought it was going to be a pretty crowded election day in November, that you might get there and find lines.
Yeah, November will be a whole different story. And I've talked to people a lot who try to make inferences about what's going to happen in November based on August. And I've always preached that the elections are so different. The voters who turn out, the demographics, the geographics. It's really hard to try to make deductions about what's going to happen in November based on what we see today. There is, on our ballot in Florida in November, there's going to be things in there that will bring out young voters, that will bring out minority voters, that will bring out Democrats. There's just not much on the ballot today. If you're a Democrat in Duval County or Clay or St. John's, there's very little on the ballot that can motivate you to get there. That won't be the case in November.
See, the interesting thing that I wrote about this last week, I had never heard of a state committee man and state committee woman running. Maybe it was just one of those things I just never noticed. But there's some powerhouses running for the inner workings of the Duval Republican Club Party, I should say. And literally, a street corner near me is filled with those powerhouse names.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've seen those street signs too, and that's the unusual thing. I mean, those committee members have had to run before, but for whatever reason, they're running as if they're running in a competitive statewide race. I don't know. I'm not an inside party guy enough to understand why those races have suddenly taken on a higher profile, or they feel the need, to do yard signs or commercial signs all over the city to win a state party committee person seat. But I've seen that same phenomenon you have.
Maybe it's because parties do actually exercise some power out there, and selecting the inner processes is something that they want to work on. Well, let's talk about some of the other key races in Northeast Florida. And again, as that person watching the 6 o'clock news every night, there's one or two in St. Johns County that are way up there. And not only just the candidates, but the PACs. So tell me about Northeast Florida.
Right now, watching elections in our corner of the state, St. Johns County is where the really excitement is. There's some very heated, contested county commission race down there. And St. Johns County, which has been one of the fastest growing counties in the state for a long, long time, is for probably the first time seeing serious debate going on about slowing the growth versus keeping the party going down there. You've got a slate of candidates who are essentially running on the platform of slowing down the growth versus some establishment candidates that are kind of running as a slate that are highly backed by developers and builders in that area. That is sort of the backdrop for some of the really high profile races. You've got a contested sheriff's race down there, and you've also got this very competitive race to fill former Senator Travis Hudson's Senate District 7 seat. That race between Leak and Shore has turned into proxy fights on a number of different levels. I mean, it's essentially a proxy fight between DeSantis Republicans and Trump Republicans, with Shore having the Trump support. It's also kind of a proxy fight between the insurance industry and trial lawyers. The Leak is heavily supported by the insurance industry where he works, and then Shore, of course, has got backing from this Truth Matters PAC, which is heavily funded by trial lawyers. And that is a really important battle right now in Florida, because insurance is obviously a major issue in Florida, homeowners insurance. And we expect that in Tallahassee, the next session is going to be pretty well dominated by fights over how to get a handle on the problems we have in Florida over the insurance industry.
What gets me the most is how angry the television ads are, how forceful, how they're making claims, and part of me wants to dive into the internet and find out if it's true or not.
Yeah.
Do a fact check. And the other half is, oh, that's just some PAC doing their usual attack.
Yeah, I mean, this is unfortunately sort of the part of the problem with the dark money laws. I mean, really, I'm a huge advocate for some kind of reforms to get a control over how dark money is used in increasingly in local, hyper local races. I mean, we used to see dark money used at the highest levels in the state and national, but the PAC money and untraceable money that gets traded back and forth between 3 or 4 PACs before it's finally spent. It's really, I've actually worked with a few reporters who've been trying to track what's going on down in St. Johns County right now, and it's almost impossible to track money back to its source because of the way the PACs fund each other and then finally end up paying for political ads or whatever activities. It's St. Johns County is a case study right now in why we really should reform the way that PAC money can be spent in local races.
You know, as a current reporter who has covered some of the issues that are in the Shore attack ads, I can tell you that there is some truth to one or two of the claims, but it's not the whole story.
Yeah.
And I won't go any deeper than that. I also seem to have a memory when I did political advertising in a brief period as a public relations person, that if the ad was from the candidate, that candidate had to be there in audio. I'm John Smith. I approve this ad.
Well, you're right. If it is a campaign candidate paid ad, there has to be a disclosure, not on the local, federal levels. The candidate has to actually make that disclaimer in his or her voice. In other races, you have disclaimers that are required as text at the end of TV ads. But the problem is that's not the same when it comes into money and ads placed by these political committees,
right? Because it's not the candidate, yeah.
And again, it's really hard sometimes to trace where that money is coming from because it is funneled through 2 or 3 different PACs before it's actually used to place ads.
Well, my spouse and I are both going to be happy come tomorrow when that noise ends because A, it's not my county to worry about, and B, it's the attack ads are a little distasteful.
Well, you may have a few days to enjoy that before we start getting ads for the November races.
Okay. Speaking about other races, we've got Angie Nixon and Brenda Priestley Jackson in the Florida House District 13 race, and a little softball thrown into that last week with the lawsuit by former Congresswoman Corinne Brown. So let's talk about that race and the fact that as Democrats, they're both aiming at each other.
Sure. I mean, yeah, and that's probably one of the most exciting races in the Duval area. We have some school board races. We have some judge races that are pretty interesting and important. In terms of state races in our neck of the woods here in Duval, that race promises to be one of the most compelling to watch today. Angie Nixon is a fierce retail politician. She is very strong in terms of her ground game. In Tallahassee, though, she's been kind of a thorn in the side of the Republicans get control Tallahassee. She's been very vocal on some major statewide issues. The knock on her that Brenda Priestley Jackson has made throughout her campaign is that Angie Nixon has spent too much time focusing on statewide issues and fighting leadership in Tallahassee and not enough time on district level issues and bringing resources back to her district. That would be a compelling argument. Priestley Jackson has not run a really effective campaign, at least not enough to kind of counter the really strong campaign work that Angie Nixon is known for and that she's done. Angie is probably in line. She's definitely, if she wins this election, as I expect her to do, I think she is in a position to really emerge as a statewide leader on the Democratic side.
So was there any impact from the lawsuit that was filed last week by the former Congresswoman regarding the fake mailer and the fake Corinne pics?
I mean, it was good news coverage for a couple of days. It did kind of help remind some voters of who Corinne was supporting and who she wasn't. I kind of wrote it off as a nice little campaign drama, but in the long run should not have a major impact on the outcome of that race.
Hey, another race is Becky Nathanson, District 3, against incumbent Cindy Pearson. Just a little Background on that one and where we're going into today.
Yeah, again, two Republicans running in a nonpartisan race against each other. I mean, that kind of is indicative of we've got 4 school board races going on right now, and a really pivotal time in the Duval County School Board. We have a brand new superintendent, and these 4 races really will decide, what type of philosophy controls the majority of that school board going forward as we enter this whole new era under our new superintendent. The Nathanson Pearson race is really a race about the newer sort of Moms for Liberty type of Republicans versus more traditional Republicans that Cindy Pearson is mounting. And full disclosure, I ran Cindy's first campaign, and I'm a supporter of her, so I don't want to get too far into that race. But she has brought on some kind of traditional Republican support, like former Mayor Payton and some other high-profile names like Matt Carlucci. So it really is an interesting battle that kind of exemplifies or highlights sort of the differences, the inter-party differences on the Republican side right now.
In case you're just listening, we're talking to John Daigle, who is a well-known political consultant locally and a common guest, an often guest on First Coast Connect. And we're talking about today's Florida primary, which you may or may not know, despite all the signs out there, is happening as we speak. Going to school board, there is Reggie Blunt in District 5 against Nashawn Nix and Hank Rogers. Thoughts about that school board race?
Yeah, that's probably the only school board race that has a pretty good chance of pushing to November. Again, it's another race where you have sort of Moms for Liberty type candidates running against traditional Republicans. In all likelihood, because of the fact that there's multiple candidates in that race and no one has really blown it out, most likely pushes to a November runoff.
And then District 7 School Board, Melody Bolduc against Sarah Mannion.
Again, another Bolduc, a Moms for Liberty candidate, versus Mannion, a more of a traditional candidate. It'll be interesting to see. To me, I'm looking at that race to kind of see in an August primary, you would expect that faction of the Republican Party that supports the Moms for Liberty, the Ron DeSantis, that faction will do much better than they would in November. So, I would not, I think in this environment, in the August primary environment, it's a really good environment for those Moms for Liberty candidates.
Now, we've talked about St. Johns County, but let's just go back to the slow growther race, the Hudson Gate candidates, just to refresh people. That's on the ballot. We did see an issue some months ago on the commission where there was some serious griping about a project in Ponte Vedra that was going to basically go a little opposite what we used to see, which was slow growth, lots of, land around projects, and it ended up in a little bit of legal action against an incumbent. Where do we stand on that again?
Yeah, as I said, I'm a St. Johns County resident. I've lived there for over 25 years, grew up in this area, but this is the first time I've ever, there's always been a little bit of a pushback on the rapid growth. St. Johns County is growing at an amazing rate, and it has for many, many years. And there's been small voices about controlling the growth and slowing it down, but there's never been the kind of energy that there seems to be right now about a organized effort to say, let's slow the growth a little bit. I found it really interesting on the other side of that sentiment, the 3 candidates who are considered the pro-growth candidates actually running as a slate. I don't know that I've ever seen 3 county commission candidates run a commercial together that all 3 paid for. The disclaimer had all 3 of their campaign disclaimers on it, which was pretty unusual, but it does definitely signal what's happening in St. Johns County, which is a very clear slate of candidates that is for, continuing the party down there, and others that say it's time for some new way of thinking about controlling growth.
The old saw used to be that St. Johns County never had an industry that could be a financial base for making money other than tourism. But yet, if you drive along the St. Augustine area stretch of 95, you are seeing huge project after project after project being built around 16, around the major into St. Augustine exits. And to me, that's a lot of growth. And then obviously the development in Ponte Vedra versus World Golf Village, which now is a county-owned property and has a hotel and a restaurant and a church. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, you're seeing signs of exactly what you're saying. When you see big hospitals like Ascension and Baptist and Humana and others, you see them building large campuses down there. Like you said, it's always kind of been a bedroom community. You've got the tourism industry around St. Augustine. You've got, the wealthy neighborhoods in Ponte Vedra, but you haven't had industry down there. And over the last 5 years, you're seeing major Jacksonville companies, open up, campuses in that. So it is definitely becoming a lot less of a bedroom community and a lot more of its own community itself with its own business base.
Of course, if you have your bedroom there in your $300,000 house, you want a hospital nearby, you want a good shopping center, you want an office center where you might eventually work. So the development is going to support all of those communities that have been coming in. I mean, take a look at at the Fruit Cove area.
Yeah.
That is wall-to-wall now development. I can remember when there was a bar at the corner of Fruit Cove Road and 13, and that was it. And of course, I am that old. Let's talk about that circuit court judge race. I will tell you that one of those candidates' mothers was out handing out campaign material at car shows months ago.
Yeah.
And it's a judge's race. I ran a judge's race and advertising campaign. You're limited in what you can say in a judge's race. You can only say A, B, and C.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, there's a big push in a judge's race.
Yeah. Well, you're right. Traditionally, the Florida Bar has really controlled what judicial candidates can and can't say. One of the big changes in the last few years has been that that through some court battles, they are now allowing judicial candidates to use the word conservative. And that's really playing out in that race between
Nancy Cleveland, Ashley Wells-Cox.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Cleveland has really picked up on the fact that she can now go out as a judicial candidate and tout being the conservative candidate in that race, and that's sort of really drawn the line in that race. Cleveland is running to the far right, touting her position as the conservative in the race, and in August, that's not a bad strategy. I'm not sure, again, if this race were in November, whether that would be the right way to go, but for this particular voting population, Cleveland is smart to kind of tout that.
But yet that's a nonpartisan race, and there have been some comments that pushing conservative is implying Republican, which makes her not nonpartisan.
I mean, that you can make that argument. It as the bar has affirmed, it's Cleveland can now go out and say that she's a conservative, and if people want to infer that that means she's the Republican in the race, that I'm sure that's part of the strategy. But like I said, in an August primary in Duval County, that's not a bad place to be.
Okay, with a few minutes left here with you, John, any surprises or insights that today's primary might give us as we go toward November?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly, as we talked about, I'm certainly watching the way that the 4 school board races go. I think that's going to be really important. We're at a really pivotal time in education in Duval County, and I think those 4 races could have a huge say on the makeup of that board over the next few years. So I think those races are hugely important. Aside from that, personally, I'm a political junkie, so I'm watching the circuit judge race. I've got a candidate in the county judge race, so I'm obviously watching that one very closely as well.
Yeah, I actually had a county judge race too back in my past, and we'll just leave it at that. Now, what about the false flag operations by these PACs? Certainly, we've talked about it with some of the St. Johns County, but is there any other PAC that's being visible or working their way through some of the races here?
That's a trend that we've starting to see more and more lately in primary elections, where one party tries to get involved in the outcome of what happens in the other party's primary. We saw it here locally in the last sheriff's race. We saw the Waters team getting involved in the primary, really kind of trying to push Jefferson over Burton. They actively worked to help Jefferson out because they preferred to face him in the general. We saw it statewide happening in the Christ race last time, where the Republicans got involved in that primary, and I think we are seeing it in I think that is part of the dynamic in that Lake Shore race, where trial lawyers who are traditionally on the Democratic side have gotten very heavily involved in what is essentially a Republican primary, and trying to basically say that the candidate they want to win is more conservative. So I think we'll see more of that as time goes on.
And I guess the final question is the elephant in the room, no pun intended, is obviously we're in the middle of a presidential race. So what are you thinking about with the Trump versus Vice President Harris?
It certainly will create a very different dynamic for November. I'm not sure it has much effect on today's August primary, but it will bring new energy. It will bring new voters to November. There is discussion. I'm not taking it seriously yet, but there's discussion about Florida possibly being in play. We've got a long time to go. 77 days is a lifetime in politics. So there's a lot of politics to play out. But I think Florida's election, because of what's happened at the Democratic ticket, Florida's election will be a lot more interesting than it would have been.
Well, I'll tell you, I could not stay up last night that late to watch the president speak. I did catch some of Secretary Clinton. I think they're going to have to prime time this stuff so that we can watch this if we so choose to. And then obviously we've got a debate or two coming up, a presidential, a vice presidential, and I'm going to watch those.
Yeah.
There is new life. So, all right. John Daigle, we have talked politics, local, state, and national with you. Great to have you here. We're on First Coast Connect, and we want to thank you so much. And coming up next, two local theater powerhouses. And my parents used to play this when I was a kid. Life is a grand ensemble performance, not a solo act. The spirit of collaboration is never more in evidence as the Florida Theatre and Theatre Jacksonville join forces to present a special in-concert production of the Broadway musical, I guess you know it by now, Mame. Joining me are several of the key players here. We've got award-winning Broadway film and TV performer Linda Purl, Jacksonville native Broadway performer Dorothy Bishop, Sarah Boone, executive director of Theatre Jax, and Numa Cecilin, president of the Florida Theatre. I'm sort of in awe here. I almost want to say right now, Numa, just kick it off here. I mean, I well know the Florida Theatre stage, and I can't believe what I'm seeing in the notes you're going to transform that place into.
So I landed in Jacksonville 12 years ago, and one of the first people I met was Sarah Boone here. And I mentioned to her I had this idea that one way the Florida Theatre could be involved in the local cultural community was to produce an in-concert version of a Broadway musical. And Sarah, with a little gleam in her eye, said, "Promise me you'll never do this with anybody but me." And here we are 12 years later, promise kept. It took a few years to get here. One of the reasons I was interested in doing this was because I thought it would be a great opportunity for us to be involved with the local performing community. Everybody knows the Florida Theatre is a great American concert hall, but we don't get too many opportunities to work with the local performing community. What we did not anticipate was that it was also a great opportunity for some people with deep Jacksonville roots who had migrated elsewhere to come back to town and work with us here in their hometown. And here we are.
And it's not just, first of all, the particulars. It's Saturday night
At 7:30, Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock, floridatheater.com, 355 ARTS.
And it's mid-20th century New York City. Mame Dennis, an eccentric bohemian with wealthy friends. And this is not a standard Broadway production. This is a stage reading performance. Okay, I'm giving you your cues. What's a stage reading performance? What are we going to see?
You're going to walk into the beautiful Florida Theater that has been newly renovated. And on stage, you're going to see, I believe it's a 26-piece orchestra on stage. And behind it, a 20-something chorus. And in front, the principal players will be reading. Well, we won't be reading from the script, but the scripts are there. The folders are there for us to reference. And everyone is on stage. And this doesn't happen how often do you get a full orchestra anymore? You just don't. So
I do film productions and everybody does a table read. You sit there and you have your script, but this is way further deeper than that. And our two actors here, ever done anything like this? Yes, no, maybe?
Yes, I have. However, there's nothing like Mame. It's an extraordinary musical. It's Jerry Herman's score, and I think he loves singers. It's so friendly. He puts all the vowels and the consonants in just the right place. And the story is really about something. They are hit. The cast of characters is hit by the Depression, and they find their bootstraps and they find their joy, and they call on all the factors of resilience, and they emerge triumphantly into life. So it's a hugely uplifting show. And the orchestrations are, I mean, I think one of my main challenges in doing this is going to be able to get through it without crying. The strings come in, the horns come in, and you just rips your heart out. It's in the best possible way. It's an
And you're playing which
exhilarating-
character?
I'm doing Mame.
Okay.
And
At first, I said, "Oh no, I'm not old enough to do it." And then I realized, "Oh yes, I am," because when Miss Lansbury originated the role, she was a good 20 years younger than I am now. Never mind. The thing is, there are ghosts in this. I mean, Angela did it, Lucille Ball did it, a bunch of, and you somehow, as you get your mind and your mouth and your spirit around these words and these songs, you feel those ghosts in the room of everyone whose patina is.
Actually, there
on
is a
this
ghost up in the
role.
balcony at the Florida Theater. We're
Oh,
told.
good.
In costume or
Ish.
Ish.
Yeah.
Yes.
Lots of splash. Lots of glitter.
I think one of the things that's so
Eyelashes.
special about this particular event is that it is a combination of people in Jacksonville with our guest artist. And the thing about it is the phone calls that were made, pretty much everybody said yes right off the bat. And Dorothy, you and I have known each other. We're both from Jacksonville.
College roommates.
Yes. And I called her up. I said, "How would you like to play Vera Charles?"
I
in
didn't even
Mame?
have to think about it. I'm like, yes,
Absolutely.
I will be there.
I have, if you want to call it this, acted in some film productions. How do you act but yet stay, I guess, are you in front of microphones? Or are you just orating with a boom mic on you? How do you stay in character yet act like you're doing a read?
Well, we're mic'd,
Okay.
so we
we're
don't have to
mic'd.
worry. Yeah, we don't have to worry about leaning into a standing microphone. We have what are these called? Lavaliers.
The little lav booms, yeah.
It's part of the
wireless
glory
mics.
of the Florida theaters that
Yeah.
it's a beautiful house with all the bells and whistles, and we're being seen to by the crew with just extraordinary care and expertise. But I tell you, the play, the book, and the score moves along like a house of fire. So it's just from the downbeat of the orchestra, you're just in it, and hopefully, the audience they're just going to have to fasten their seatbelts and take the ride with us.
Well, I've got to ask our actors. There is a notorious episode on Broadway with a certain famous singer, actress, who basically took a cell phone from an audience member because they were constantly texting. I'm looking the songs. We Need a Little Christmas, Bosom Buddies, If You Walked Into My Life, Mame. Are you going to be competing against an audience that's singing the same things you're singing? Both of, or do you want them to sort of, hey, join in the fun?
Oh, goodness. I don't know. I mean, we have, hopefully, I think, judging by the demographic of the ticket sales so far, it's a huge range. So there are people that probably grew up with this and people who are totally unfamiliar to Jerry Herman and the Mame score. So I think that's the other thing about the piece is that it appeals to, I mean, there's some very adult themes in it, and it's absolutely a family musical. I remember seeing it in the original production. I was 7 or 8 years old. And I mean, I remember it to this. I think it's probably, if I ever had a moment that said, that's what I want to do, it was sitting in the balcony of the Winter Garden, I guess, and thinking, yeah, this is.
Well, there's
is
nothing
for me.
like a Broadway stage to be out there and on Broadway, to be out there watching the before and after show, to be in one of those houses. I did also as a kid get to see some things on Broadway thanks to my parents.
Nothing like it unless you're at the Florida Theater with that orchestra and that chorus
Yes.
coming at you.
And actually, Numa, I made the comment, gee, there's an orchestra pit there, and I was corrected. The orchestra pit has been raised so that you have more stage. So orchestra is part of the production.
Yeah, the orchestra is on the stage, and we should talk about Joey.
Yes, right. Joey Chansey is our conductor, musical director. Joey grew up in Jacksonville. He's actually one of the kids that came through Theatre Jacksonville and has gone on to great things. He is a Broadway conductor, and he's come back in, and he's with us now. And he's quite wonderful, and we're so excited. I think it's so thrilling to be part of this entire team. And part of this show too is that I hope it's a discovery for people, because when we were talking about which shows to do, this came up, and I think Numa, we talked about it, and so many people, a lot of people didn't know the show. They're the younger generation, so they're going to come in, and there's so many stock events that happen in this that we know that people are going to see for the first time, and it's going to be like it's a brand new show. But with all of that lush orchestration under it, it is just going to be fabulous.
Well,
I'm
in
excited.
case you don't know, and I'm honored to be here, Linda Purl, Broadway credits, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, Getting and Spending, Fonzie's girlfriend, Andy Pfister in Happy Days, Pam Beasley's mother, Helene in The Office, Ben Matlock's daughter, Charlene on Matlock. My mother used to watch that all the time. And then Dorothy Bishop, Mame's best friend, Vera Charles, a Jacksonville native. She's been on a Broadway national tour of Terrence McNally's masterclass opposite Faye Dunaway, and best known in New York City for a long-running cabaret hit, Dozen Divas. So for both of you to come back to Jacksonville to be on the only remaining theater palace that's left, that maybe you saw movies in back in the day, is it cool just to be here? And we are educated in this market. We have seen some of the great Broadway tours. So if you're a Broadway fan, maybe this is a little different place to see a Broadway play. So tell me, what is it like to be back back there on the stage versus in the audience?
I'm not a Jacksonville, although I feel sort of native. Sarah Kindly's brought me down a few times, but I tell you, yesterday afternoon we walked into that theater. I did for the first time, and it's just breathtaking. You just sort of feel your knees go. It's awe-inspiring, just the structure itself. But Dorothy, you're from here.
Yeah, but I have not performed in that theater, and I don't even know if I've been to the theater. I've seen it on the outside. I was definitely, it is so stunning. And when I sang my first number on that stage, I got a little choked up. I had to breathe because it was just so beautiful and awe-inspiring. And
I did a spelling bee as a host on that stage, and told the audience that Elvis had played there, and half the audience was like,
yes,
"Really?"
Elvis.
And so that's some of the history right there. What are the challenges of doing this kind of production where you're not acting and wafting across the stage and remembering your marks?
It's fast.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll find out on at the weekend. Right now, there's no time to sort of judge or be objective about it. It's just we're just in it, and the process is so much fun. And that's the thing that I feel very confident that sense of fun and joy and exuberance will translate to the audience, because it's just the music is unstoppable. The arrangements are unstoppable. And Joey, as you were saying, you're Florida, Jacksonville native. He's fantastic. He's so chill. He's so calm, and he's pulling us all together and moving us forward. And we'll do the same once we have the orchestra.
So being that it's such a different beast, why is this important to Northeast Florida? We see concerts there. We see plays in other facilities. This is bringing something different, I guess.
If you're a performer in Northeast Florida, how many times a year do you get to perform with a full orchestra? Never. How many times do you get to be on a stage the size of the Florida Theater? Never. So it's a chance for our best local performers, and Sarah's done a great job of recruiting them. It's a chance for our best performers to be on a stage with a live orchestra and show us their best work. It's a chance for the Florida Theater to work with them, which we don't often get the chance to do. As Linda said, it's a chance to introduce a new generation who might know Les Mis or Rent to a forerunner from the canon of musical theater. And it's just an opportunity to do something that's not happening in Northeast Florida right now. Nobody's doing this kind of production in concert. And ticket sales have been good so far. There are still a few left. FloridaTheater.com.
Yeah, just in case you didn't say it before.
Yeah, and with a minute to go, I'm guessing working to a full house for you actors here. That's what you want, right?
You betcha.
Always.
Yeah, the more the merrier.
Yep.
Everybody, come join us, y'all.
It's fun.
And will you take a cell phone away? No.
Absolutely not. I'll put money down that nobody's going to be on their cell phone during this. Will.
Okay, that, again, Mame is at the Florida Theater, Saturday at 7:30 and Sunday at 2 p.m., and this is a different version of the famed Broadway musical and film. This is a stage reading with a full orchestra. I would say this might be a beast that should come back to prowl the Florida Theater again, yes?
We're thinking about it.
Yes, we are. This has gone very well, and we're hopeful that it turns into something on a regular basis.
Well, I want to thank you all for being here. Linda Purl, Dorothy Bishop, Sarah Boone, and Numa. After the break, we'll return.
Mayo Clinic. Seeing the unseeable by using advanced imaging technology to improve accuracy in diagnoses and treatments. More at mayoclinic.org/Florida. Sing Out Loud Festival presents the Live Wildly Showcase with Noah Kahn, Eric Church, Nora Jones, JJ Gray and Mofro, and more. September 21st and 22nd in downtown St. Augustine. More information at singoutloudfestival.com.
Jarren Duran of the Boston Red Sox was suspended for 2 games for using a homophobic slur.
I don't think that my actions should represent what the team and MLB represent. It was just a bad moment on my part, and I'm owning up to it and apologizing for it.
The struggle for major sports with LGBTQ inclusion. I'm Tiziana Deering. That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11 on WJCT News 89.9.
On the next Fresh Air, author and scholar Frank Guridy joins us to talk about his new book, The Stadium, An American History of Politics, Protest, and Play, where he chronicles how stadiums are our nation's public squares and the battle over race, class, gender, and sexual.
President Biden has a plan to reform the Supreme Court. It comes as one poll finds that more than 3 in 4 Americans support a binding code of conduct for the highest court in the land. What reforms would bring trust back, and will it happen? That and the latest from the Democratic National Convention next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
It is one of Broadway's finest musicals, debuting in 1959 on Broadway. The show loosely based on the 57 memoirs of striptease artist Gypsy Rose Lee, who I am old enough to have actually seen on TV because she was out there and doing stuff back in New York City. Said to be one of the first burlesque artists to imbue a striptease with grace and style. Well, joining me are 2 of the cast members for Alhambra's production of Gypsy. It's Lisa Valdini Booth, who plays Rose, and Peter Klapsis in the role of Herbie. Guys, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you for having us.
You know, first of all, like I said, I have a vague memory of Gypsy Rose Lee being on the Merv Griffin show or whatever as a New Yorker. But what's the story about, guys? Take it away.
Well, it is the story of an overbearing mother, me.
Uh-huh.
I have to really work hard to be this character.
Overbearing stage mother.
Stage mother.
Yeah.
A stage mother who is living vicariously through her 2 girls, and she started the younger daughter, June, who became an actress in her own right, June Havoc, Broadway and movie actress.
Oh, yes.
So June, she started her at 2.5 years old on the stage and touring on the vaudeville circuit. And Louise was her sister. And Louise really didn't have the talent that June had. So the overbearing stage mom really focused everything on baby June and then dainty June. And kind of Louise was pushed a little bit to the back in the act, but not the talented one. And so the story evolves, and it ends up Louise is the one who becomes the stripper and has an opportunity in a burlesque house that they were booked into by mistake. And Mama says, "It's the star spot, get out there," and shoves her on stage. And you're right. I mean, she really redefined striptease. Burlesque at that time was very bawdy and
dirty.
And Louise had grace
I'm
and
just
style.
thinking bump, bump, ba-dum, bump, ba-dum.
Yes, exactly.
That's the drum beat, yeah.
So, you know, but yeah, she had banter with the audience and quick-witted. And so she really kind of had her own style, and it made her a huge star.
And that's what made Gypsy Rose Lee popular as an older person, was she was so quick to with the comeback. She was a great guest to have on. Well, obviously, talking about banter, Pete, you play Herbie, the agent for Rose's children, and I'm guessing you got a little bit of Brooklyn in you there somewhere, a little bit of huckster going on there. So tell me some of that role.
Well, Herbie is he started out as a theatrical agent, and then he got tired of it because one of his lines is, when my talent wasn't good enough, I got stomach ache and ulcers. So he left and he becomes a candy salesman, and he happens to notice Mama Rose, and eventually becomes the agent and love interest. So he actually falls head over heels for this woman.
Now, I haven't been, bad boy, I haven't been to Alhambra in a very long time, but I remember that it's a single stage, and I don't know about backstage, but what is it like to stage Gypsy when everybody wants to have their lovely dinner and a glass of Chianti?
Yeah. Well, it's always a challenge for us because our stage is not huge and it's a thrust stage, so the audience sits on three sides. But we don't have a whole lot of backstage space.
And you're a Booth from the
And
Booth
I-
family, from the
That's
Alhambra
right.
family,
Yeah.
so you know it well. Yes.
Yeah. So it's like a jigsaw puzzle backstage. Making all the pieces. Like last night, we had our tech rehearsal, which
First tech, yes.
we focus on the scene changes in particular. And it's like, okay, you have to come out this way, but take one step to the left because this set piece is coming past you here. And then we have kids in the show. So it's like all kids flat up against the wall so you don't get trampled. And
Right.
so it getting all those moving parts. And it's always a challenge, but we always make it work. And our set design team they've just come leaps and bounds. And we've added so much great technology that we didn't have 10 years ago.
Right,
We have
projections and
things that make it much easier to make it a reality.
So,
the
Pete,
set.
who are you channeling since Carl Malden was, I guess, if you're
Carl,
filming?
Jack Klugman did it on
my.
Broadway originally.
Mhm.
I'm trying to aim in between, steal a little bit from here, a little bit from there, and try to bring as much of me as possible into the role as well. So it's a lot of fun, though.
Okay, Mame, Alhambra Dinner Theater, right there on Beach Boulevard. When, how long, what time?
Gypsy.
Gypsy. I'm
Gypsy.
sorry.
I know,
I'm sorry.
hey, you're doing back-to-back theater.
It's back-to-back amazing
And
theater
we're
women.
excited about the Mame people too.
But what are
That's another
for
exciting
the
show.
fan who wants to see Gypsy?
August 22nd it opens, which is this coming Thursday.
Right, and it closes September 29th.
There you go. 29th.
And again, it's dinner theater, one of the few remaining in the country, with a chef who knows what he's doing, and I'm only blanking on what might be on the menu, but the bottom line is the stage comes out and you are right on top of
Yeah,
the
it's
folks
very
there.
intimate,
Yeah,
and that's
very
one of the lovely things about our theater. It's very intimate. The audience is right there.
They're part of it, actually. Yeah, and the food is wonderful, of course. And we're excited.
And the good thing is, I'm noticing the Alhambra is rotating a lot of shows quickly. They're getting a quick run, and they're bringing some classics in, and obviously that's the fun part. Well, I want to say thank you, everybody.
Thank
Don't
you.
forget Gypsy at Alhambra Dinner Theater. I want to thank you, Lisa Vadini Booth and Peter Klapsis. That's our program. We encourage your feedback and suggestions. You can send either to First Coast Connect at WJCT.org. If you missed anything, catch our rebroadcast at 8 p.m. or find our entire archive at WJCT.org or on your favorite podcast. So join us tomorrow as we unpack election results with political expert and top government attorney Chris Hand. I'm Dan Scanlon. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health.
The Cummer Museum of Art and Garden's new exhibition, Fabric of a Nation, American Quilt Stories, from the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, on view through September 29th. Visit cummermuseum.org for more information. Life South Community Blood Centers, providing blood and patient services to the local hospitals, serving patients in this community. Donating blood with Life South helps save lives. More at lifesouth.org to find a blood drive near you. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.